You know the sticker price, but what's the real cost of buying a vehicle? Recent experience for me caused me to break down some numbers. I'm going to share that more coming up. My name's Mike Bernard, the host of the Wise Money Show. I'm also one of the certified financial planners right here at Korhorn Financial Group. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and smash that thumbs up button. Transportation is necessary, and I suppose if you live in a big metropolitan area where there's a lot of public transportation, you maybe don't need a vehicle, and that's fantastic. But here in the Midwest or many locations, you need transportation. It's just practical. Even with this day and age where there's Ubers and everything else, you need reliable transportation. So you need a car. I'm not arguing that, and yet I don't love owning a car. I don't love owning a car, and I don't like buying new vehicles, guys, and because there's a cost. There's a cost to owning a vehicle. We know the sticker price, like I mentioned, and part of what I don't love about buying a car is, well, is that really the price or is it not? You know, I don't know. I'm not a car person. I'm not a car guy. I was recently talking to another one of our young stars here, rising stars, Andrew, and he is a car guy. And he's actually told me about the vehicles that he has purchased. He's rehabilitated, he's refurbished and been able to sell even after using for more than what he purchased it for. And he's like, yeah, I've been able to make money. And I know that that's possible. But I do know that vehicles, okay, are necessary, and yet they often don't help you build wealth. They don't typically help you with on the path towards financial freedom. So there's a cost to owning a vehicle. And in economics, there's also an opportunity cost, if you're familiar with that term, where, hey, you can have dollars go here or go there, but you can't have that same dollar go to both places. So if you have a dollar go here, what's that experience? And comparing that difference between that dollar going here, there's an opportunity cost. And guys, listen, my oldest is turning 16, and I've shared before that is sort of that experience and what that has meant for our insurance, but we needed to buy a vehicle. We needed to buy a vehicle, and I did not want to. I wrestled with this, and then we verbally wrestled with it as well. Can she just borrow one of our vehicles when we're not using it? How practical is that with our large family? Is there a beater that she can get? Is someone that we know getting rid of a vehicle or something like a hand-me-down? Like anything I could do to sort of negotiate my way out of the reality that, yeah, she needs a reliable vehicle, and we're going to need to make this purchase. I didn't want to, okay, but we recently did. And I want to tell you about the math that I did in my head to help you, as maybe you're thinking, well, you know, I'd like a newer car, or maybe it's time for a new vehicle. Some of the math that I did to break down that opportunity cost, that real cost when you buy a vehicle, and maybe this helps you. So this might sound a little crazy, but for most of us, vehicles aren't assets. Yeah, they show up on our balance sheet, but they are depreciating assets, and really, some would classify them as liabilities. They don't produce value for you. They actually take cash flow away from you. So here's the math, okay? Pretend in this scenario, you need to buy a reliable but used vehicle, okay? $25,000. And I have no idea if that sounds like a lot or a little. I don't know. It's all personal preference. But here in the Midwest, if you need a used vehicle, but you need it reliable, and you also need it to carry certain things and have all-wheel drive for the winters and that sort of thing, 20 to 25 grand, let's just call it $25,000, okay? If you're not getting a loan, and you've worked hard and you've saved up and you've got that $25,000 sitting in cash, you can probably earn about 4% on that money. And that's not perfect, and interest rates are coming down, but let's just make to make the math simple, $25,000, if you weren't buying the vehicle, if you kept it in savings, it earned 4%. A year later, instead of $25,000, it would be $26,000. Yes, I know there's some taxes on that, but for simple math, that $25,000 would be $26,000. If opportunity cost, you bought the vehicle, okay? Vehicles, brand new vehicles, tend to depreciate about 30% in their first 2 years. But you're not buying a new vehicle, used vehicles tend to decline in value between 8 and 12% a year after those first couple of years. So let's assume that your $25,000 that you purchased a vehicle for is going to depreciate 8%. So 1 year later, instead of $25,000, you've got $23,000. So our opportunity cost between those two paths, I'm not buying a vehicle, I'm keeping the cash in savings, or no, I'm going to buy the vehicle, and what's it worth 1 year later? $26,000 compared to $23,000. Now, we could stretch that out over a long period of time and see very, very different numbers, but let's just say at least 3 years. It's, in this case, if you're buying a reliable vehicle for a first vehicle or reliable vehicle for a young child, 3 years later, hopefully they're still driving it, but maybe they're selling it or making a change. So 3 years later, let's extrapolate that out. At earning 4% a year by not needing to buy the vehicle and keeping that money in cash, and say it can continue to earn 4% each year, that $25,000 ballpark average is just going to be worth around $28,000 3 years later. However, that $25,000 purchasing a vehicle, declining 8% a year over 3 years, you're going to be left with close to $19,000 3 years later. So $28,000 compared to about $19,000. Guys, we're near, this opportunity cost, near a $10,000 gap in actual wealth or net worth just 3 years into this sort of experience. Now, this is all high level, looking at the opportunity cost of what you could do with $25,000, right? But you can extrapolate this out. But we know it's more complicated than that. So let's go one layer deep. You could get a lot more granular than this, but let's go one more layer deep. We know that there are additional costs, real costs to owning a vehicle. It's not just buying it. Yes, you've got to put gas in it and all that sort of stuff. Now, I'm assuming you've got transportation, whether you're buying the vehicle or not. So gas, you're paying for gas. But owning a vehicle, you've got to insure the vehicle. You've got to register the vehicle, and there is going to be some maintenance, okay? Let's assume that insuring the vehicle, $1,200 a year. And you might, and again, that is dependent on where you are. That's based on your own driving record. That's based on a lot of different factors. But let's just average it out to $1,200 a year for insuring the vehicle. Let's assume registering the vehicle, plates and all of that, $300 a year. Again, that's going to vary widely depending on your experience here in the Midwest. That's about right. And then let's say maintenance on the vehicle averages $500 a year. Now we know that's lumpy. So there are times when you're going to have a $3,000 expense just like that, or tires or something like that. And then there are other times where you're not going to have any maintenance with it other than an oil change here or there. But let's just average it to $500 a year, and I think that potentially could be low. $1,200 a year for insurance, $300 a year for registering the vehicle, and $500 a year for maintenance. That's an extra $2,000. So now let's go back to that opportunity cost after just 1 year. Again, that $25,000 left in savings, not buying the vehicle, earning 4% is going to be worth $26,000. But the actual vehicle depreciating 8%, instead of $25,000, you'll be left with $23,000. But it's going to cost you an additional $2,000 in addition to that. So instead of $23,000, 1 year later, you're really left with $21,000 compared to the $26,000 if you didn't buy the vehicle. Extrapolate that out over 3 years, your $25,000 kept in savings is worth $28,000, but your vehicle value goes from $25,000 down to about $19,000. But it also costs you $2,000 a year in cash flow, and so you've got to take over 3 years. That's $6,000 coming out of your pocket. That real cost of that vehicle is now $13,000, or that real value is now $13,000. Compared to $28,000, guys. That opportunity cost demonstrates how vehicles, for most of us, are actually liabilities as opposed to assets. Yes, technically it lands on your balance sheet, but it's depreciating in value, and it's actually taking cash flow instead of generating cash flow for you. So what's the point? The point of this is not to say don't buy a vehicle. That would not work for my 16-year-old, and it's not practical advice either. You need vehicles. You need that transportation. The point isn't to not purchase those, but instead the point is rather to have as much money as possible. While doing those necessary things, have as much money as possible going towards appreciating assets, assets that will appreciate in value and in the future can generate cash flow for you as opposed to take cash flow from you. These are things like building up that savings account, your emergency fund, as well as owning equities, owning businesses, owning stocks, whether that's exchange traded fund, mutual funds, or individual equities. Yes, that's volatile, and yet they have the most appreciating potential, and the potential to generate income for you out there in the future. All of those categories of assets, as well as true liabilities, loans, mortgages, credit cards, all of that becomes visible, becomes tangible when you're looking at your net worth statement. So work with your certified financial planner on that. If you don't have a CFP on your team, you can contact one on my team. Find us online, Korhorn.com. That's Korhorn with K, wisemoneyshow.com. You can find us there as well, or send us an email, info@korhorn.com. All right, there you have it. Go out and take your next wise step in your financial life.